From out of a world of beauty, excitement, and adventure, the story of the bighorn sheep and their rugged, precipitous mountain home. This is one episode from the untamed world. Scattered around the world are many beautiful and rugged mountain ranges. Among these, the Rockies rate as one of the most spectacular. And in the context of geological time, they are still young, rising a mere 60 million years ago. The natural beauty of the Rocky Mountains is complemented by one of their most magnificent inhabitants, the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. Largest and most common of North America's wild sheep, these majestic creatures make an unforgettable sight as they roam their alpine habitat. The 300-pound rams sport the massive circular horns from which the species takes its name. Bighorn sheep are agile mountain climbers. Their feet are uniquely developed to handle the great variety of terrain over which they must travel. Soft elastic pads absorb shocks as the sheep jump from ledge to ledge. The outer edge of the hoof is sharp. The underside is soft and concave, forming a suction cup which gives bighorns good footing on rough, hard, or slippery ground. The bighorn sheep's neighbors, the mountain goats, are perhaps not as agile, but are considered to be even more sure-footed. Not true goats, but members of the antelope family. They are shyer and more elusive than bighorn sheep. Being in the northern climatic zone, the Rocky Mountains experience dramatic seasonal changes. The change to spring is by far the most welcome. Ice and snow, which paralyze the land throughout the long winter, begin to break up and melt. And for the white-tailed ptarmigan, a permanent resident of this area, spring means a new wardrobe. Its plumage alters to match the color of the landscape. And the male bird loses no time in attracting a hen with its piercing mating call. For the bighorn sheep, mating takes place during November and December. Spring, usually May or June, is the time when lambs are born. The ewes carefully select the spot in which the young will be born. This is normally a secluded ledge, which gives protection from predators as well as the elements. As an additional precaution against the weather, lambs are born over a 2-month period. This ensures that a goodly percentage of them will not be subjected to the sudden and often severe storms common at this time of year. At birth, the lambs weigh 10 pounds. But this weight will increase to 75 pounds before winter. The newborn lamb does not remain helpless for long. Within an hour, it is standing on tottering legs, making its way to its mother. For the first few days, it nurses almost hourly, and then begins to supplement its diet with tender young plants. Several hours after it is born, it can follow the ewe as she moves about. With each step, the lamb becomes more stable and is soon exhibiting signs of its inherent agility. Communication is an important factor in the lamb's early days. A ewe and its lamb engage in a frequent exchange of bleating, much like domestic sheep. This interchange becomes a significant part of the spring chorus, which echoes around the mountain slopes. Hungry young rufous hummingbirds join in. At times, almost are also witnessing the birth of a new generation. The long, gangly legs of a young moose would appear to be a handicap, but in fact, they are well designed for wading through a watery habitat. The warmer weather which accompanies spring provides the lambs with an opportunity to extend their playtime, often well into the evening. Lambs become more competent with each passing day, and the close watch originally maintained by the ewes is relaxed accordingly. The lambs are allowed off on tangents of their own. Raising the lambs is the exclusive responsibility of the ewes, and the relationship between an individual ewe and her lamb is a close one which lasts for more than a year. Flocks of 10 or more ewes, lambs, yearlings, and immature rams are formed. Each ewe shares the task of protecting and teaching the young. Sometimes nursery groups are formed in which one ewe will watch over a group of young lambs while the other ewes feed in peace. But a lamb will always find its mother when it feels the pangs of hunger coming on. A lamb will continue to nurse until it is about 5 or 6 months old. The feedings decrease gradually in size and frequency as the lamb makes the transition from milk to vegetation. Predators such as coyotes, bears, lynx, bobcats, and eagles may rarely take newborn or diseased sheep. But by escaping on cliffs too steep for other animals, a healthy sheep can almost always elude pursuit. In detecting the presence of these predators, the bighorns have an ally in the little Colombian ground squirrel. Not only does this creature share the same habitat, many of the food sources of the bighorns, it also has a number of common enemies. When it senses danger, the squirrel lets out a series of loud chirpings to warn other members of its own kind. The sheep have learned to heed this warning. All summer, the adult rams loaf in bachelor groups of 10 to 15 animals, taking no part in the upbringing of the lambs. These groups are usually under the leadership of the oldest and strongest individual. Often, leadership is simply determined by horn size. However, it is not uncommon for another member of the group to challenge the leader anytime during the year in an undeclared struggle for domination. But the real battles are fought during the rutting season in late fall. The bighorns spend their days roaming the mountains searching for the best feeding grounds. It is important for them to consume a good deal of the most nutritious vegetation, for without it, they could not endure the hardships of winter. When they are sleepy or want to chew the cud, sheep make daybeds of varying simplicity. Sometimes they paw the ground several times and lie down. Other times, they just flop down wherever they feel tired. This is particularly true of the young sheep. Night beds, however, are a different matter. They are carefully chosen, usually on the lee side of a mountain, just under the crest of a ridge, where possible enemies can be heard approaching from any direction. These beds are about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and up to 6 inches deep. Oddly enough, when it comes to rating the dangers which threaten the bighorn sheep population, predators such as the grizzly bear score very low. A different and far greater danger is posed by the mule deer, the elk, and domestic livestock. While carnivores like the grizzly prey upon old and diseased sheep, herbivores like the elk, mule deer, and livestock compete with healthy sheep for a common food source. This seriously depletes and damages the vegetation on the winter range of the wild sheep. As the level of nutrition is lowered, so is the bighorn's resistance to disease and predators. For the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, summer is the most important season. They must utilize it to the fullest. The quality and quantity of summer forage is a major factor in building up their strength for winter. Once a year, normally about July or August, bighorns shed their hair. Until they get their new coat, they have a bedraggled, scruffy appearance with patches of old, matted hair hanging loosely from their bodies. As the old coat is being shed, the new one is growing in. The coat of wild sheep is not woolly like that of domestic sheep. It is more like that of deer and is made up of a coarse layer of long hair extending over a loose layer of very fine fur next to the skin. The bighorn is a browser as well as a grazer, eating from shrubs and bushes as well as low-growing plants and grasses. When it eats, it uses its front 8 teeth, which are called incisors, to cut off the vegetation. The remaining teeth are deep-rooted molars, which are adapted for chewing. During its lifespan, some 7 to 10 years, all of a sheep's teeth are gradually worn down by the grit it picks up in its food. While domestic sheep will often scorn water if there is rain or dew on their grazing, bighorns prefer to drink heartily from water holes and mountain streams. Toward the end of summer, sounds of heads crashing together begin to echo more and more frequently from the mountainsides as the rutting season is ushered in. Young rams have butting contests to try out their budding horns. Fortunately, a double layer of bone on the skull roof protects both young and old warriors. They rarely have anything more serious to contend with than a temporary period of grogginess and a few chips off their horns. The rut takes place during October, November, and December. It is the only occasion on which male and female sheep will be found together. As the season reaches its peak, the rams openly declare war on each other as they strive for the right to breed with the ewes. Sometimes the battles are over quickly. Other times they last for hours. But with few exceptions, they end on good terms. When the rams separate, it is not always apparent which is the victor. Wild sheep are extremely promiscuous animals. Many times the loser, as well as the winner, breeds with the ewe. Harems of 5 or 6 ewes may be formed. The master may guard his harem jealously, or he may elect to share it with other members of his group. However, strangers are rarely welcomed. Rams are sexually mature at 3.5 years of age. Ewes a year earlier at 2.5. Ewes will bear 1 or occasionally 2 lambs following a gestation period of 6 months. Breeding continues until late December. In prime condition after the summer, rams are well prepared for the rigors of courtship, and they are very attractive mates. Luxuriously clad in brown winter coats, they proudly carry their magnificent curling horns. Desirable ewes are eagerly pursued, even to a point at which they may wish solitude or rest. If this happens, the ewe will crawl out to the end of a narrow rock or hide under a tree or ledge. She may take to the cliffs, leaving a trail of anxious suitors behind her. When winter arrives, ewes and lambs reform their flocks. The rams return to bachelor groups. The bighorns then retire to their respective winter ranges, wherever they can find shelter and forage. Here they will spend the most difficult months of the year. There were probably over 1 million wild sheep in North America at the start of the 19th century. Today, the population is thought to be about 25,000. The biggest reduction in bighorn numbers occurred from 1850 to 1900. This reduction was largely caused by man, either directly or indirectly. Excessive hunting, sometimes to provide food for pioneers, and sometimes just for sport, was one of the earliest and most severe depressants of the population. When man introduced domestic sheep, he also introduced new diseases to the wild sheep. Other livestock were brought in, principally cattle and horses. Together with the domestic sheep, they substantially reduced the range and food supply of the bighorn, which forced the sheep into crowded conditions under which both new and old diseases spread rapidly. Still, these infections would not have reached epidemic proportions had predators been abundant enough to remove the infected sheep. But there were few predators. They had been effectively controlled by the livestock owners, so the wild sheep's population continued to drop. Fortunately, conservation measures were begun in the early 1900s, and in some areas the sheep population is now on the rise. National parks and game reserves protect many bighorns. Others have been relocated to old ranges where they will now be safe. Restrictive hunting policies have helped to increase the population. Man has permanently settled or changed so much of the bighorn's range that the population can never again reach its original high of over 1 million animals. But if plans for further conservation measures are effected, the population can be retained at a safe level. Man can cease to be a threat to the bighorn sheep. The animals can then direct their energies to another serious threat to their numbers: lack of good quality winter forage. In winter, sheep feed mainly on grass, pawing through several inches of snow to reach the tender blades. They also browse on the twigs and buds of such shrubs and trees as sagebrush, rabbit's brush, wild cherry, willow, and certain pines. The quality of this winter food is often low. It is affected by shallow, rocky soil, snowdrift, exposure to high winds, and overuse by other herbivores, in particular the elk. The sheep rely more on vegetation than any other component of their environment. And if the quality is sufficiently lowered, they may be weakened, so that parasites, together with bacteria causing pneumonia, can cause epidemics capable of wiping out entire herds. Winter is a trying time for the Rocky Mountain bighorns, a time when just maintaining themselves can be difficult. It can be a very long time.